For something smoky and sweet, you need to try this cocktail right here. Let me show you how to make a smoked maple old fashioned. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, I'm the Whiskey Nerd, and like I said, today I'm making a smoked maple old fashioned because it's getting a bit dark now. It's getting to the end of the year and I'm looking for something that's warming and has a bit of that kind of earthy vibe to it. And earlier on this week I reviewed a smoky little whiskey. It was from Two Stacks. If you want to see that review, I'll put a link to it up there. There'll be a link down below, and it got me thinking, what kind of smoky cocktail could I make? And I thought a lovely little old fashioned, a smoked old fashioned is what I'm going to make. And for me, I'm going to use maple syrup. This is Canadian maple syrup, just store-bought. But I thought, what works really well with that? A bourbon. Buffalo Trace is going to be a classic little bourbon. Going to work out a lot of good flavors, a lot of kind of like almost peanutty, almost maple syrup vibes. So it works really, really well here. And I'm going to be using a little bit of bitters. These are whiskey barrel aged bitters from the Fee Brothers and just classic Angostura bitters from the Angostura orange bitters. For me, they're like your salt and your pepper. Use a bit of standard bitters, a bit of orange bitters. For an old fashioned, you get a really, really good flavor. But in terms of smoking this cocktail, well, I've got this little kind of smoking chimney here, and I've got a few little applewood chips. So how it works is you put a few chips into the top there, the little grate, and you get a little blowtorch, like this little cook's blowtorch. Fire goes out, and you put the smoke into the cocktail. Now, if you go to restaurants, if you go to cocktail bars, what they'll often do is, if they give you a cocktail, they'll smoke it up top and they'll give you a smoky cocktail. They'll take it off, you get this big waft of smoke, and it looks really cool. But the problem with that is your cocktail then has this really layer of like densely, almost sharp smoke up top, but the smoke doesn't penetrate into the rest of the cocktail. So I always find that when I get one of those smoked cocktails, yeah, it looks cool, but it doesn't really taste as nice as I'd want it to do. So what I'm going to do instead is, when I make my cocktail in my mixing glass, what I'm going to do is I'm going to smoke the cocktail there, let that smoke sit into that top layer, and then I'm going to mix it, and then I'm going to stir it, so get that flavor from the smoke all throughout the cocktail, so it's fully mixed into the entire drink. And because the smoke is going to be entirely throughout the drink, I am going to make it a little bit sweeter than normal. So for an old fashioned, for me, normally for like maple syrup, what I'll do is I'll just do like a single bar spoon, maybe a little bit overpour a little bit. That'll give you 5 or 6 milliliters, something like that. But for me, for this kind of cocktail, because it is going to be that bit smokier, because that smoke is going to penetrate throughout the drink, I'm actually going to go in with 2 bar spoons, about 10 mil of my maple syrup. You can of course go in with a bit more, a bit less, depending on your personal preference. But I think that's enough time talking about the cocktail. I think it's time we make it. So I'm going to get my mixing glass, I'm going to pop a nice rock of ice into there, and then I'm going to measure out my ingredients. For me, for an old fashioned, I always go in with a double pour. So I'm going to go in with 60 ml or 2 ounces of my Buffalo Trace bourbon. If you want to see a review of this lovely little bourbon, I have a video, I'll put a link to that there. There'll be another link down below. Myself and my wife Rose reviewed this bourbon. It is really nice. It has a classic kind of bourbon flavor that gives you, well, just those classic bourbon notes that you want, and I think it works really well in cocktails like this when you got that kind of maple syrup vibe, where you get that extra bit of sweetness coming through, even though this is of course Canadian maple syrup. So like I said, I'm gonna go in with 2 bar spoons, just 1, and then 2. And I'm gonna let that, because there's still maple syrup on there, just gonna sip that into the cocktail, and then go in with my bitters. Like I said, these are the whiskey barrel aged bitters from the Fee Brothers. You can go in with classic standard Angostura if you want. These for me just have a little bit of extra, almost extra sweetness, a bit of extra density, and for me they actually add a lot to old fashions. And I might even do a video comparing Angostura, these, but if you want to see a kind of video, let me know down below if bitters actually make a difference in cocktails, because to me I think they absolutely do. So that was 2 dashes of my whiskey barrel bitters, and then 1 dash of my orange bitters into there. And then I'm gonna not stir it around just yet. I'm gonna take my spoon out, because I'll have all that maple syrup off it now, and I'm gonna get my little chimney smoker. So I'm gonna pop this up top there, and I'm gonna get a little pinch of my wood chips. You actually don't need a huge amount, and if you use too much, it actually kind of blocks it a little bit. So just enough to like barely cover that little grate in there. And then I'm gonna get my little chef's blowtorch. You can use like a jet lighter or anything like this. I just got this little kitchen supply store. Just gonna turn on the gas and then just smoke it away. And as those burn, you'll see that little bit of smoke is coming down there. Just gonna go to the other side, get all those chips. And I'm gonna let that sit for not a huge amount of time, maybe only like 10 or 20 seconds. So I'm just gonna let that sit in and all that flavor sit into the top of the drink before I mix around into the rest of it. If you actually want to see a video where I compare different ways of how to use a cocktail smoker, whether you put it on top, whether you actually shake that smoke into the cocktail, I'll put a link up there, a link down below as well, because I think it's really interesting to use these kind of cocktail smoker kits in different ways. Yeah, you can put the smoke on the outside, but sometimes you want that smoky flavor into the cocktail, right into the middle of it, and that's what we're going to be doing here today. So I think I've let that go for long enough, because you actually don't need this sitting in here for a huge amount of time. If you want, you can smoke the glass and get even more smoky flavor into the cocktail, but for me, I think it's nice to get that flavor throughout it, but not to overpower the cocktail. You don't want to overpower the bourbon, the maple syrup, the bitters. You want to taste the smoke as an ingredient, but not the only thing you can taste. So I'm going to pull it off, and it does look kind of cool, but like I said, we're not here for presentation, we're here for taste. So I'm going to stir this down. I'm actually going to stir it for about 30 seconds because I want to get it really nice and really cold, so I'm just going to keep on stirring it. Okay, I think that is nicely chilled now, so I'm going to get ready to strain it out, and I can taste there's a really nice flavor there. So I need a classic kind of old-fashioned rocks glass. I'm going to pop another fresh rock of ice into there before I strain it out. I'm going to pop my little strainer up top and just pour onto that lovely fresh rock of ice, just like that. And like I said, if you wanted to, you could then, like if you want to smoke it again, if you want, you could do it again, you could get extra smoke on it. But one advantage of doing it this way is if you're making 2 old fashions or 3 old fashions and you only have one of these little things, you can get all that smoke into the cocktails and just batch them up rather than trying to smoke each one individually and just wasting time. So for a little garnish, going to go in with a little piece of dehydrated orange into there, just like that. And that right there is how I make a smoked maple old fashioned. Now real quick, before I taste this cocktail, if you're new here, scroll down, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button. I put out whiskey reviews like the review of the Buffalo Trace every Wednesday, and I put out cocktail recipes featuring whiskey every Friday. So if you want to see videos like that, make sure you hit subscribe. And while you're down there, let me know in the comments if there's any cocktails you want to see me make in future, because I'm always interested to try out new recipes. But right now, let's taste this recipe right here. Cheers. Oh, that is nice. Like I said, the smoke has gone into the cocktail. Like as you bring it up, you get a little bit of the smoke, not the same way like you get in those restaurants where the top layer, the top little bit has all this really sharp smoky flavor. You get a bit of smoky, a bit of earthiness, but it doesn't overpower everything else. You can still taste the bitters, you can still smell that kind of maple syrup vibe, you can still smell the bourbon behind it, which has this really nice backbone of flavor. But again, it's not the only thing you can taste. They're all quite nicely balanced. If you like it a bit smokier, you can of course smoke it for longer, sweeter, add more maple, make less maple. You can kind of tailor it, and that's one of the reasons I really love old fashions, because you can tailor it to match your own taste. So let's give it another taste. Yeah, it's not like you used a smoky whiskey like a Scotch whiskey. It is like you used smoke, like you smoked the cocktail, you used it as an ingredient and added a bit of contrast to the bourbon, to the maple, to the bitters, and just give you this really nice balance of flavor. So I think that's enough time talking about it. I'm going to keep on enjoying this. Like I said, if you want to see more videos like that, make sure you hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Sláinte.